Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back once again to Indab Africa. This is Chris, and today's topic is something that I find deeply disturbing and something that we rarely see in Botswana, yet has appeared as a consequence of an article appearing in the Daily Maverick, a newspaper based in South Africa. And this is about the case involving Brigitte Motsepe-Radebe. Now, specifically, what am I talking about? A journalist for the Daily Maverick, Karine Duplessis, ran an article today in the newspaper, the 26th of June, 2020, with the title, Botswana Lawyers Decry Involvement of AfriForum in Brigitte Motsepe Case. Who are these lawyers? Well, the Daily Maverick interviewed a single lawyer in Botswana. And this lawyer is the vice chairperson of the Law Society of Botswana. His name is Mboki Chilisa. Mboki Chilisa. So let's talk about what happened here. In the article in the Daily Maverick, Chilisa is quoted as saying, "We're all extremely disappointed by the appointment of AfriForum, given what AfriForum stands for. It's not something we expected or thought government could do." Well, now I'm very curious. What does he have to say? "It is a group which seeks to stand in opposition to transformation, and a group that seeks to stand in the way of trying to redress inequalities of the past in South Africa," Chilisa said. Really? That's strange. That's not at all what AfriForum is. It's a civil rights organization that seeks to protect the rights of minority groups in South Africa. All minority groups. The timing is very bizarre. At the moment, there is a global wave that seeks to uproot racism the world over. And in this sensitive and delicate time, you decide to engage AfriForum? That's very alarming. Chilisa said the political dynamics at play in the case meant the Botswanan government might have thought that appointing an organization who stands in direct opposition to the government of the day would give them political advantage. Instead, it could make relations worse. Well, never mind that assessment on the part of Chilisa. Let's talk about who we're talking about here, and then I'm going to go into some of his social media posts. So Mboki Chilisa is the proprietor of the law firm Collins Chilisa Consultants. And he acquired this company from Peter Collins in 2012 after being Peter's professional assistant for the previous 6 years. Now, Mboki has been attorney of the High Court for the past 12 years. His practice includes employment law, commercial and property law, as well as administrative and constitutional law. He is a graduate of UB, the University of Botswana, back in 2005, and he is an attorney of the High Courts of Botswana since 2006. And a conveyancer and notary public since 2006. And as I mentioned, a member of the Law Society of Botswana. Okay, that's fine. So having seen these comments and these accusations against AfriForum with no evidence, no examples given by Chilisa, I thought I'd take a look around. And it took just a few moments to find a Facebook page of his. And in that, he has posted. And in the interest of full disclosure and full fairness to Chilisa, I'm going to read some of these things that are not objectionable. And then we'll talk about the objectionable part. So on the 30th of April, he posted on Facebook, Tiamo Rantau is using COVID-19 to preach communism. First, he says tenants must not pay us our rentals. Now he says private schools should not provide e-learning because it's unfair to those who attend government schools. He is trying to achieve within 6 months what the opposition has failed to do for the last 54 years, exclamation point. And Ngata Koma is smiling wherever he is. Not really sure where he stands there politically, but it sounds as if he's concerned about the interest of Botswana, and that's fine. On the 16th of May, he writes, Spencer Mugabe, in his weekly column, The Watchdog, offers very robust criticism of the executive. It's not quite clear as to what has triggered it, but it makes for interesting reading. He contends that the presidency has come under the undue influence from the Asian business community. He says, or that's Chinese, of course, that's what I mean. He says, so far, there is little difference between Kama and President Masisi. He seems unsettled about the marginalization of Mr. Balopi. Perhaps it is about time we have a law that prohibits members of the executive from receiving gifts without approval of Parliament to address any perceptions and insinuations of capture. Well, that on its surface, there's nothing wrong with that. He seems to be an advocate who's standing up against corruption. Although his method I would disagree with. I would not suggest that Parliament is the right institution to oversee corruption. It should be an independent body or an auditor or an inspector general that prevents gifts from being accepted, that sort of thing. Nonetheless, looking out for the interest of Botswana. Okay, we're tracking. On the 13th of June, We hope as things go from bad to worse financially, our leadership is busy putting together a stimulus package for informal traders and small business and not registering more companies and preparing more tender bids. While on the surface, that appears that Mr. Chilisa is concerned about the informal sector. If you watch my channel and watch my videos, you'll know and note that from the outset, even before a lockdown began in Botswana and Southern Africa and across Africa, I've been an outspoken critic of government and its indifference to the informal sector, particularly in Botswana, where the government finally announced a program of 10 million pula. 10 million pula, an absolute joke given the number of informal traders that exist in the economy in Botswana. Insufficient. And I've been outspoken critic of Gaborone for this abject failure. But they're not alone. Look across the border in South Africa. It's just as bad, if not worse. Nonetheless, looking out for the informal sector. So thank you for that, Mr. Chilisa. Back on the 1st of May, we roll back to May 1st, of course, which is Labor Day in much of the world. Here in the United States, we don't celebrate May 1st as Labor Day. Labor Day for us is actually in September. It's the first week in September. It marks the end of our summer season. But most of the world, along with the communists and the socialists and the great May Day parades in the Soviet Union during the Cold War, all celebrate Labor Day on the 1st of May. And in his post, which is a rather long post on Facebook back on the 1st of May, there you go, he mentions the following. The picture, there's a picture in the post. The picture was taken following delivery of Judge Dingake's judgment reinstating workers dismissed during the historical 2011 public sector strike. That was 9 years ago. What's that got to do with anything? Well, the reason I mention this is because at the time, they hired an outside attorney, something he takes issue with now. I was authorized by Motsamai to get the best public law lawyer in Southern Africa at the time for the appeal. Wim Trengove of South Africa is the person they hired. This is a white South African who was hired to represent their interest in Botswana. So he clearly has no difficulty with bringing in outside attorneys. But the problem I have here is the slander that takes place. As I mentioned in the article, he makes these allegations in the Daily Maverick in today's article against AfriForum, saying that they're an organization that seeks to stand in the way of redressing inequalities of the past. I've not ever seen a statement or any social media or any publication by AfriForum that makes that claim. So I'm not so sure where he makes that claim unless he's simply bigoted and falling back on tired racist narratives. So let's talk about this. On his Facebook page on the 23rd of June at 12:03 p.m., he writes, "Black Lives Matter. And then you go and appoint a right-wing Afrikaner advocacy group, AfriForum. Exclamation point, exclamation point, question mark. Too many contradictions." To which, to their credit, folks responded. Tebe Benjamin says that AfriForum can force the South African government to respond. We can't from here. Our lawyers always engage these old white men. What's the fuss about? Okay, the bigotry of old white men aside, thank you for that interjection there, Mr. Benjamin. And this is what Mboki Chilisa says in response on his social media page. A gentleman who's interviewed, and the Daily Maverick gives the world the impression that lawyers in Botswana are angry or upset or up in arms that the governor of Botswana has hired Jerry Neal through AfriForum to represent his interest in a lawsuit in South Africa. This is what Mr. Mboki Chilisa, the vice chairperson of the Botswana Law Society, has to say. "I suppose you've got no difficulties in services being procured from pedophiles, rapists, white supremacists, and mass murderers as long as they're competent." Seriously? You're an attorney? Supposedly a learned person, an educated person? And you make these slanders, statements, this libel, as it's printed, against a civil rights organization in South Africa on the basis of what? And I should inform you, Mr. Chilisa, that in South Africa you would be subject to a lawsuit because what you've done is a crime here. That's right. What you've done is a crime. You've without justification, without any evidence whatsoever, you've accused a civil rights organization of being pedophiles, rapists, white supremacists, and mass murderers. What mass murder has taken place in South Africa since the formation of AfriForum? What exactly, what mass murder have they been involved in? Not a single one. The only mass murder taking place in South Africa is the daily murder of South African citizens, a reprehensible number that exceeds 60 people per day before COVID-19 and is still significant at this point. You want to talk about mass murder? We can talk about the rural, brutal slayings of South African farmers and farm workers as well. And that's one of the reasons why AfriForum exists, because the South African government has neglected rural security, disbanded the security units such as the commando system to protect the people in the rural South Africa, and left rural South Africans to their own devices as they become the target of criminal syndicates and organized attempts to destroy farming. But you call them pedophiles. Are you serious? How can we take you serious? You appear before the High Court in Botswana, and this is the kind of logic you have? I really feel badly for those of you whom you represent if this is the extent of your intellectual capacity, sir. So to which Mr. Benjamin says, wrong assumptions and comparisons. You guys engage those guys from South Africa here. What is wrong in government employing them to unlock these banks in South Africa? Logic. Good statement, Mr. Benjamin. Thank you so much for that. To which Mr. Chilisa says the following. No, it's actually most appropriate. It means you have totally missed the point. The point is not that South African lawyers were engaged. It makes sense that South African lawyers should be engaged to assist in South Africa. Yes, we agree. The concern is how, with the engagement of AfriForum, which is a white supremacist group, that is the objection. Engagement of a group that seeks to defend the gains made by whites under apartheid. What are you talking about? Where's your evidence here? I realize it's a social media post, but give an example. Not a single example given here. This is inflammatory language by an esteemed member of the bar, someone who practices before the High Court in Botswana, and this is what you engage in? You're not some 19-year-old misfit or malcontent who's angry about something you don't understand in the world. You're an attorney, an experienced attorney, who owns a law firm. And this is what you engage in, sir? To which Mr. Benjamin responded, and then at the end, fed up or frustrated that Mr. Benjamin is making logical remarks and is making sense, Mr. Chilisa finally replies about 8 hours ago now that, okay, then there's nothing wrong with my analogy above. It is okay to engage rapists to catch other rapists, murderers to catch other murderers. Sir, your vile, disgusting bigotry, bordering on racist slander and libel against a civil rights group is shameful. And this is not part of Botswana. This is not Botswana. People don't proudly say, "Ke Botswana," for this garbage, for this utter cock, this nonsense spewed by an attorney. You should be ashamed of yourself, sir. If you think that AfriForum is the things you claim they are, they're pedophiles, they're rapists, they're mass murderers, then how about some evidence of it and not simply your uninformed, bigoted opinion, sir? Shameful, shameful, shameful. This is not Botswana. It's bad enough that Masisi and Kama damaged the reputation of one of the most successful countries in Africa with their personal feud and become the laughingstock of the international community. It's also bad enough that elephants are dying in mass numbers and nobody knows anything about it. And it's even far worse that the government of the day, under the BDP, has done virtually nothing to help the informal sector in Botswana. Not to mention its overreaction in Gaborone when 12 people turned up positive for COVID-19 in a local hospital. They shut down the national capital again. All of which damages the reputation of a sound country that has had excellent governance throughout nearly its entire history. But to see a person who's before the bar, who testifies in front of the High Court of Botswana, go to the media and tell lies, distortions, and whole cloth untruths about a civil rights organization in another country because his anger over God knows what he's upset about. This is unfortunate. This is not Botswana, ladies and gentlemen. For those who've never been to Botswana, I urge you to disregard this buffoonery, this idiocy. This is not who this gentleman is, or this is not who this country is. This does not represent the Botswana, whether they're Kalanga, or they're Bangmamwato, or Bamwaketsi, or whether they're Basarwa, or they're white Afrikaans-speaking Botswana, or Europeans, or others who've settled in this beautiful, lovely country, a jewel in southern Africa, with a long established history of stability, governance, and increasing prosperity for all its citizens. Race is not something that people in Botswana interject in daily discourse to attack others who are different from them. In Botswana, people embrace diversity and differences of opinion and differences of views. This gentleman Mr. Mboki Chilisa. This is very disappointing, sir, and shameful. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been a video about what I consider to be a very disturbing topic, the racialization of public discourse by an attorney of the bar in Botswana, talking about the bizarre case of Brigitte Motsepe Radebe, whose sister is married to the sitting president of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, and whose husband is a former minister and very highly influential member of the ANC, Jeff Radebe. What's happening here? Why does this happen? Well, if you liked this video or you found it interesting or at least thought-provoking and you're not a subscriber, I ask you to subscribe to the channel by smashing that subscription button right down there. And be sure to toggle that little bell icon so you get notified of my updates of my prepared videos like this, my Stray Voltage live streams, and also my regularly scheduled Saturday program in which I interview someone of interest from around Africa or the U.S. on issues related to the U.S. and Africa and or China. Feel free to leave comments. I try to read all comments. And finally, I ask that you smash that like button right down there because that drives viewership. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in on this unfortunate topic. God bless you and have a pleasant day.